Her wrist was still burning where his fingers had grabbed her. 300 guests in that ballroom. 300 phones that could have been recording, and not one person moved to help her. Until he did. Folake Adeyemi had told herself every single morning for the last 2 years that this job would not break her. Not the long hours, not the cruelty of certain guests, not the loneliness of raising a 3-year-old alone in a city that never once asked if she was tired. Tonight she almost believed she'd been wrong. Earlier that morning she had knelt in front of Irete's tiny mirror, braiding her daughter's hair, while Irete narrated an elaborate story about a dragon who only ate jollof rice. "Mommy, will you be home before I sleep?" "I'll try, baby. Mommy has a very important event tonight." "Is it scary?" "No," Folek had lied, smoothing down one final braid. "It's just work." She hadn't known yet how wrong that answer would turn out to be, or how much that single night would end up reshaping both their lives. The Eco Grand Imperial was lit up like a second sun. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung over a dance floor, polished to a mirror shine. Korean businessmen in tailored black suits mixed with Nigerian senators and oil executives, champagne flutes clinking, laughter sharp and performative. It was the night Kang Group officially launched its West Africa headquarters. The biggest deal Lagos had seen in years. Folake had been assigned to lead the hospitality team for VIP guests. A good opportunity. The kind of night that could change her career. She didn't know yet that it would change her entire life. She was refilling a tray of champagne near the East Wing when a hand closed around her wrist. Hard. Too hard. "You! Come here." Park Hyunwoo, heir to Park Industries, one of Kang Group's biggest investors. Drunk, loud, used to getting whatever he reached for. "Sir, I have other guests." "I said come here." He yanked her toward him, his fingers digging into her skin, his breath thick with whiskey. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Someone laughed nervously, the kind of laugh people make when they're relieved it isn't happening to them. Folek's tray tilted. Glasses slid. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "Let go of me," she said, low, steady, even as her hand trembled. "Relax. I'm just being friendly." His grip tightened. His other hand reached for her waist. That was when the room went silent in a different way. Not awkward silence. Fear. Because Kang Tae-min was already crossing the floor. If you've ever seen a man move like the air itself was clearing a path for him, you'd understand what that ballroom felt in that moment. Tae-min didn't shout. He didn't need to. His footsteps were the only sound anyone could hear. He was the CEO everyone in that room owed something to. Cold. Precise. The kind of man whose face gave away nothing. Not in board meetings. Not when rivals tried to provoke him. Not even 3 years ago when his own father was buried, and he stood at the grave without shedding a single visible tear. Tonight, his face gave away everything. "Take your hand off her." His voice was quiet. That was what made it terrifying. Park Hyunwoo laughed, too drunk to read the room. "Tae-min, relax. She's just hotel staff." He didn't finish the sentence. Tae-min's hand closed around Park's wrist with a speed that made 3 security guards flinch. He twisted it back, not enough to break it, just enough to make Park gasp and release Folak instantly. Glasses shattered on the marble floor. For 1 full second, nobody breathed. "Apologize," Tae-min said. "What?" "Tae-min, you're embarrassing yourself over a..." "Apologize to her, now." Park's face went red, humiliation curling into rage, but something in Tae-min's eyes made him swallow whatever pride he had left. "Sorry," he muttered, not even looking at Folake. Tae-min released his wrist like he was discarding something filthy. Then he turned to Folake, and his expression changed completely. Soft, searching, almost afraid he'd find her hurt. "Are you all right? If this moment is already pulling at something in you, stay with me, because what happens next is the part nobody in that ballroom saw coming." Folak nodded, though her hands were still shaking. "I'm fine." She wasn't. Not really. But she had learned long ago that some wounds you carry quietly, especially when you're a single mother whose job depends on her composure. Tae-min didn't look convinced. He turned to his head of security. "Get her somewhere private. Make sure she has water. and get her wrist looked at. Sir, that's not necessary. It is, he said, and walked away before she could argue further. By midnight, the story had already spread through the hotel staff like wildfire. The Kang Tai-min, the man known across 3 continents for his glacial composure, had lost control in front of 300 guests, over a waitress. Nobody knew why, not even Folik. She went home that night to her 1-bedroom flat in Seoul, paid the babysitter, and sat on the edge of Iredi's bed long after the lights were off, just listening to her daughter breathe. Some nights that sound was the only thing that reminded Folak she hadn't imagined her way into surviving. Her phone buzzed. Bisi. Babe. Babe. Are you seeing what's online right now? I haven't checked. Folak. Kang Tae-min twisted a billionaire's wrist for you. On camera. People are saying he looked like he wanted to kill the man. He probably just hates scandal near his company's name. Sure. That's why his hand was shaking when security walked you out. I saw it, Folek. That man wasn't protecting his brand. That man was protecting you. Folek had laughed it off then, tired and aching and unwilling to let herself hope for anything that wasn't guaranteed. Hope, in her experience, was expensive. She'd already paid for it once in Seoul, and the bill had nearly destroyed her. She fell asleep that night, still half expecting a termination letter by morning. What she got instead was a transfer notice with her name on it, and a future she never could have predicted. She sat in a small staff lounge afterward, ice pressed to her wrist, replaying the moment over and over. The way his voice had dropped, the way his eyes had searched her face like he was looking for an answer to a question he hadn't asked yet. She told herself it meant nothing. Powerful men protected their reputation, not waitresses. He probably just hated scandal near his company's name. She almost believed that too. 2 days later, her phone buzzed with a message from her supervisor. Mr. Kang had personally requested she be reassigned indefinitely as a hospitality liaison for his executive floor. Her first thought was fear. Her second thought was Iredi. Folik's daughter was 3 years old, with a laugh that could undo even the worst day and a habit of falling asleep mid-sentence while telling stories about imaginary animals. She was the reason Folik got up every morning, even when her body begged her not to. She was the reason Folik had left a life in Seoul she never spoke about, and rebuilt everything from nothing in Lagos. If this new assignment meant more money, more stability, more chance to give Ireti the life she deserved, Folik couldn't afford to say no, even if it terrified her. She walked into Kang Tae-min's executive floor the following Monday, with her spine straight and her fear buried somewhere underneath it. He was standing by the window when she entered, looking out over the Lagos skyline, hands in his pockets. He turned, and for a second something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or recognition of something he couldn't name yet either. You didn't have to request me specifically, she said, skipping pleasantries. I would have been fine staying where I was. I know. Then why? He studied her for a long moment. Because what happened to you should never happen to anyone in a building with my name on it, and because I wanted to make sure you were actually all right, not the answer you gave everyone else that night. Folik's throat tightened. Nobody had asked her that so directly in a long time. I'm managing, she said quietly. That's not the same as all right. No, she admitted. It's not. He didn't push further. He simply nodded, like her honesty was enough for now, and gestured to the desk near the window. This will be your station. You'll coordinate my schedule with the floor staff, handle international guest relations, and report directly to me. That's a big jump from event hospitality. You handled a drunk billionaire's son with more composure than most of my board members handle a bad quarter, he said. I trust competence when I see it. It was the first time she saw something close to a smile on his face. Small, barely there, but real. Weeks passed differently than she expected. Tae-min was not warm in the way people imagine warmth. He didn't flatter her. He didn't make grand gestures. But he noticed things. He noticed when she skipped lunch because Iredi's daycare called about a fever. He noticed when she stayed late, not because she wanted to, but because rent was due and overtime helped. One evening, she found a small bag on her desk. Children's medicine, the exact brand the pharmacy had been out of that morning, along with a thermometer and a note in handwriting, too neat to belong to someone careless. Heard your daughter wasn't well. This should help. TM. She stood there holding that bag longer than she should have, fighting back something she didn't have a name for yet. That night, she brought Iredi to pick her up from work, since daycare closed early and Folik had nowhere else to take her. She hadn't planned for Taemin to still be in the building. He stepped out of his office right as Iredi, fearless and curious in the way only toddlers can be, ran straight toward him and wrapped her tiny arms around his leg. "Hi," Iredi said, beaming up at him like he was the most fascinating person she'd ever seen. Folik froze. "Iredi, no. Don't. I'm so sorry, sir. She doesn't understand boundaries yet." But Taemin was crouching down, slow and careful, like he was approaching something fragile and important. "It's all right. Are you Mommy's boss?" Iredi asked. "Something like that. You're tall. You're very small." Iredi giggled, delighted by this observation, and Folak watched something soften in Taemin's face that she had never seen in any boardroom, any gala, any headline photo. He looked for just a moment like a man remembering something he'd lost a long time ago. "She likes you," Folak said softly, once Iredi had run off to inspect the office plants. "I'm not used to that," Taemin admitted. "People being unafraid of me. Maybe that's because she doesn't know what you are yet, just who you're being right now." He looked at her then, really looked, like her words had landed somewhere deep. "Maybe that's the version of me I'd rather people knew." After that evening, something between them shifted quietly, without either of them naming it out loud. He started staying a little later, finding reasons to be near the executive floor's small kitchenette, right when Folak brought Iredi by after daycare hours. He learned without being told that Iredi liked her water in a cup with no ice, and that she refused to nap unless someone hummed the same 3 notes her mother always hummed. "You don't have to learn these things," Folak told him once, half amused, half something gentler. "I want to," he said simply. One Saturday when Folak's babysitter canceled last minute and a client meeting couldn't be moved, Taemin insisted on watching Iredi himself for 2 hours rather than letting Folak miss the meeting. Folak returned to find her daughter teaching the CEO of Kang Group how to properly stack building blocks into a castle for sad dragons, and Taemin, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, following instructions with a seriousness usually reserved for shareholder negotiations. "You're doing it wrong," Iredi informed him solemnly. "The pink one goes on top." "My apologies," Taemin said, and rebuilt the entire tower without complaint. Folak stood in the doorway for nearly a full minute before either of them noticed her, just watching, her chest aching with something unfamiliar and terrifying. Not fear this time. Something closer to longing. That night, after Iredi was asleep, Taemin walked Folake down to her car the way he'd started doing most evenings, an unspoken ritual neither of them had agreed to, but neither wanted to break. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "You can ask. I can't promise an answer. Why isn't there a wife, a girlfriend? Someone in your life already before all this? A man like you, surely." "There was someone once," he admitted, leaning against the car beside her. "Years ago. My family arranged it. The way these things are arranged in families like mine. She left before the wedding, said she couldn't spend her life married to someone who treated affection like a liability. Was she wrong?" "No," he said quietly. "She wasn't. I built walls early, Folak. My father taught me that emotion was a weakness our enemies could exploit. I believed him for a very long time. What changed?" He looked at her for a long moment, the streetlight catching the rare softness in his expression. "A woman stood up to a man twice her size in a ballroom full of people who wouldn't help her. And I realized walls don't actually protect you from anything. They just make sure you face everything alone." Folek didn't have words for that. She simply reached over and laced her fingers through his. The first time either of them had initiated something resembling intimacy, and they stood there in the parking garage for a long, quiet moment. Two careful, guarded people slowly learning how to stop bracing for impact. It would have stayed beautiful if the world had let it. 3 weeks later, Folek walked into the staff break room and felt the temperature of the room change. Whispers stopped. Eyes dropped to phones, to coffee cups, to anything but her. Bisi, the only real friend she'd made at the hotel, pulled her aside immediately. You need to see this. It was a gossip blog, the kind that thrived on scandal in Lagos's elite circles. A grainy photo of Thai men crouched in front of Areti in his office, taken through a half-open door. The headline screamed, Kang Group CEO's secret family, mystery woman and child spotted in executive offices. Folake's stomach dropped. This is insane. There's nothing between us. Doesn't matter what's true, Bissy said grimly. Matters what people believe. And someone leaked this on purpose. Folake scrolled through the comments despite knowing better, the way people always do when they should simply close the screen. Strangers debating her worth like she was a character in a drama instead of a real woman with a real child. Some calling her a gold digger. Others insisting Taemin would never let a nobody near his office without reason, as if reason and decency couldn't possibly exist in the same sentence. She set the phone down, hands trembling. I never asked for any of this attention. I know, babe, Bissy said, softer now, squeezing her shoulder. But attention found you anyway. Question is what you do with it. She was right to worry, because the someone who leaked it had a name, and that name was about to become the most dangerous thing in Folake's life. Park Hyun-woo had not forgotten the humiliation of that gala night. Pride, for men like him, was currency, and his had been publicly bankrupted in front of everyone who mattered. He'd spent weeks looking for a way to repay that humiliation. When his assistant brought him the photo of Taemin and the child, something cold and calculating settled into his expression. Because Park Hyun-woo recognized that little girl's face. Not from that night, from years ago in Seoul, in a hospital corridor he'd walked through exactly once. Angry and 24 years old, refusing to sign papers a terrified young woman had begged him to sign. If this is the part where your stomach is starting to turn, good, because it's about to turn a lot more. Falake Adeyemi had lived in Seoul once, before Lagos, before Kang Group, before any of this. She'd gone there at 23 on a hospitality exchange program, full of ambition and naivety, and fallen into a relationship with a charming, wealthy Korean man who made her feel like the city belonged to both of them. She still remembered the night it ended, even now, even with years between her and that version of herself. A private dining room overlooking the Han River, candlelight flickering against expensive glass. She had been so happy that night, certain he was about to propose, certain her life was about to become the kind of story she'd dreamed about since she was a girl in Lagos, reading romance novels under her blanket with a flashlight. Instead, he'd slid a folded document across the table. Not a ring box, a settlement agreement. My family has arranged my engagement, he'd said, not quite meeting her eyes. It was always going to happen eventually. I should have told you sooner. Eventually, Hyun-woo, I'm pregnant. His face had gone pale in the candlelight. That complicates things. That complicates things, she'd repeated, the words tasting like poison. Your child complicates things. His family had moved fast after that. Lawyers, a settlement figure large enough to buy a house outright, conditions attached like chains, disappear. Never use the family name. Never speak of the relationship publicly. Raise the child somewhere far away, somewhere that wouldn't embarrass anyone who mattered. She had refused the money. She had not refused the leaving. She returned to Lagos with nothing but a suitcase, a secret, and eventually a daughter who became her entire world. She never spoke his name to anyone. Not her family, not BC, not even in her own head most days, because some pain you bury so deep, you convince yourself it's gone. She never imagined his shadow would reach all the way to a ballroom in Lagos, attached to the very man who'd grabbed her wrist that night. Park Hyun-woo, the same man whose family had once paid people to make her disappear. He found her 3 days after the blog post, waiting by her car after her shift, smiling the kind of smile that had never once meant safety. Folake, it's been a long time. Her blood turned to ice. What do you want? Just to talk about our daughter. The world tilted sideways. She's not your daughter. You made that very clear 6 years ago. Things change, he said simply. My father is dying. The company needs an heir with verified bloodline before the board finalizes succession. A daughter, even an unacknowledged one, suddenly becomes very useful. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I have lawyers already preparing custody documentation. DNA confirmation is just a formality at this point. You will never touch her, Fulek said, her voice shaking with a fury she hadn't allowed herself in years. You abandoned us. You don't get to walk back in because it's convenient for your inheritance. Legally, Park said, almost bored, I have every right to. And morally? Morality doesn't win custody battles, Fulek. Money does. And I have considerably more of it than you. You didn't even want to know her name 6 years ago, Fulek said, voice cracking despite her effort to stay composed. You sat in that hospital corridor and signed nothing. You let your father's lawyer slide an envelope across a table like I was a problem to be priced and discarded. Don't stand here now and pretend this is about a daughter you suddenly care about. Something flickered across Park's face. A ghost of shame quickly smothered beneath practiced indifference. Sentiment won't help you either, Fulek. Have your lawyer call mine. We'll proceed properly from here. He left her standing in that parking lot, shaking, terrified in a way she hadn't been since she was 23, and alone in a foreign country with a positive pregnancy test and no one to call. She didn't tell Tai Min, not at first. How could she? The man she'd slowly, carefully, terrifyingly started to trust was business partners with the one man capable of destroying everything she'd built. But secrets in stories like this one never stay buried for long. Tai Min noticed the change in her immediately. The way her hands shook slightly when she thought no one was watching. The way she flinched whenever Park Hyun-woo's name came up in meetings. The way she started leaving work early, picking Areti up herself instead of letting daycare keep her till evening. He confronted her on a Thursday evening, the office empty except for the two of them, and the hum of Lagos traffic far below. Tell me what's happening, he said. Not a request, not quite an order either. Something gentler than both. It's nothing you need to worry about. Fulek. Her name in his mouth had weight to it now, after weeks of careful professional distance. I have watched you hold yourself together through things that would break most people. I know what fear looks like on your face. Don't tell me it's nothing. She broke, quietly, exhaustedly, the way people break after holding too much for too long. Park Hyun-woo is Areti's biological father, she said, and he wants custody, not because he loves her, because his father is dying and the company needs an heir with provable bloodline. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she'd ever heard. Tymon's jaw tightened. Something dangerous moved behind his eyes. Something Fulek hadn't seen since the night he'd grabbed Park's wrist in front of 300 guests. How long have you known about this? 3 days. 3 days you carried this alone. What was I supposed to do? Tell my boss that his business partner is my daughter's deadbeat father trying to steal her for inheritance reasons? Yes, Taman said simply. Exactly that. Because I would have done something about it 3 days ago instead of letting you carry it alone for 1 more hour. If you're feeling the tension building right now, don't look away, because the truth that comes next changes everything you thought you understood about this story. There's something else you should know, Taman said, his voice lower now, almost reluctant, about why I reacted the way I did that night at the gala. Fulek waited, her heart pounding. 6 years ago, before Kang Group expanded internationally, my father sent me to oversee a hospital donation program in Seoul. Quiet charity work, the kind we never publicized. I walked through a ward one night and saw a young woman, maybe 23, sitting alone beside her sick mother's bed, completely out of money, refusing to leave her mother's side even though the hospital was threatening to discharge her for unpaid bills. Fulek's breath caught somewhere in her throat. I paid the remaining balance anonymously. I never met her. I never learned her name. I just remember her face, exhausted, terrified, and somehow still incredibly strong. That was, Fulek's voice cracked. That was my mother. That hospital. That was us. Taiman nodded slowly like he'd already suspected, like some part of him had recognized her the moment she stood up to Park Hyun-woo in that ballroom with the same exhausted strength he'd never forgotten. I didn't know it was you until weeks after you started working on this floor, he admitted. I saw an old donation file by coincidence. Your mother's name, the dates matched. I told myself it didn't matter, that it changed nothing about how I should treat you professionally. But it changed how you felt. It confirmed something I think I already felt the moment I saw you in that ballroom, he said quietly, that I was supposed to protect you, long before I understood why. Folake didn't know whether to cry or run, or simply stand there and let this enormous, impossible truth settle into her bones. Fate, it seemed, had been quietly stitching their lives together long before either of them noticed the thread. This doesn't fix the problem with Park, she finally said, because somewhere underneath the emotion, fear was still very much alive. No, Taemin agreed, but it means you're not facing him alone anymore. Not for one more second. Park Hyun-woo, however, was not a man who backed down from a fight he believed he could win with money and influence. Within days, Folek received a formal legal notice. Park's lawyers were filing for emergency custody evaluation, citing his biological right, and questioning Folek's financial stability as a single mother working hospitality jobs. It was a cruel, calculated move designed to paint her as unfit before anyone even looked at the actual facts. Falake read the document 3 times in the privacy of the executive bathroom, hands trembling, the words financial instability and unsuitable living conditions blurring together until she had to press her palm against the cold tile wall just to stay upright. 6 years of working double shifts, of skipping meals so Iredi never went without, of building a life from nothing in a city that had never once made it easy, reduced to a single damning line in a legal filing written by a man who had handed his daughter's existence a price tag and walked away. Timon found her there 10 minutes later, his expression unreadable until he saw her face, and then it wasn't unreadable at all. Tell me you're not actually scared this will work. He has the best lawyers in Seoul, Taemin. I have a hospitality salary and a prayer. You have me, he said simply, taking the document from her shaking hands. And I promise you, Folaki, the version of me that built this company from a single shipping contract into what it is today does not lose to men who think money is the same thing as righteousness. Taemin responded the only way a man like him knew how, decisively. He assigned his top legal team, the same lawyers who'd protected Kang Group through international mergers worth billions, to Falak's case personally. He covered every cost without making her feel like charity, framing it instead as the company's responsibility, since the conflict had emerged from circumstances tied to its own investors. His lead attorney, a sharp, unflinching woman named Director Sarah Choi, met with Folake personally that same week. Mr. Kang says you're the most composed client he's ever watched handle a crisis, she said, reviewing the case file. I need that composure for the next several weeks. Park's team will try to provoke you into looking unstable. Don't give them anything. I haven't given anyone anything to use against me in 6 years, Folek said quietly. I'm not starting now. Director Choi almost smiled. Good, then let's win this properly. But Park had other resources too. Resources that didn't operate through courtrooms. It started small. A daycare worker, suddenly nervous, reporting strange men asking questions about Iredi's pickup schedule. A black car parked outside Foleke's apartment building for 3 consecutive nights. A whispered warning from a hotel security guard who'd overheard something he probably shouldn't have. Then it stopped being small. One evening, Folake arrived at daycare to find a man she didn't recognize standing near the gate, smiling at Iredi through the bars like he had every right to be there. The daycare attendant, flustered, explained he'd claimed to be family and nearly succeeded in convincing them to release the child early before another staff member intervened. Falak didn't sleep that night. She sat on the kitchen floor of her apartment with her back against the cabinets, knees pulled to her chest, replaying every second of that gate, every word the man had used, every smile that had looked friendly enough to fool people who didn't know better. She called Taemin at 2 in the morning, voice shaking so badly she could barely form sentences. I'm coming, he said before she'd even finished explaining. Pack a bag for both of you. Tonight. Taemin, it's 2 in the morning. I know what time it is. I'm not asking you to be brave about this. I'm asking you to be safe. Folek stopped sleeping properly after that. Every sound outside her window became a threat. Every unfamiliar face in Iredi's daycare pickup line became a potential danger. She moved into a Kang Group security apartment at Taemin's insistence, something she initially resisted out of pride before exhaustion and fear won the argument for her. You don't have to do all this, she told him one night, Watching him personally check the apartment's window locks like an ordinary precaution wasn't enough. Like he needed his own hands to confirm she was safe. "I know I don't have to," he said. "I'm choosing to." "Why?" He paused at that question, like he was deciding how honest to be. "Because the first time I saw you, I told myself it was about reputation, about scandal control. The second time, I told myself it was gratitude, repaying an old debt I didn't even know I owed. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about debts or reputation. Then what is it about now?" "You," he said simply, "and the little girl currently asleep in the next room who has somehow convinced me that dinosaurs prefer spaghetti over rice." Folek laughed despite everything, a small broken sound that still managed to feel like relief. "I'm scared, Taemin." "I know. Not just for me. For her. What if he actually wins? What if money really is louder than truth?" Taemin knelt in front of her chair, taking both her hands in his composure cracking just slightly at the edges, revealing the man underneath the CEO, underneath the cold headlines, underneath 6 years of careful emotional restraint. "I will not let that happen," he said. "Not to her, not to you. I've spent my entire life being controlled, being strategic, being careful never to lose composure in public. The night I lost it in that ballroom was the first time in years I felt something more important than control. I'm not going to lose that now. I'm not going to lose you." It was the most honest thing either of them had said since the night they met. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning, but Park Hyun-woo had no intention of waiting for courtrooms to decide something he believed belonged to him by blood and money alone. 2 nights before the hearing, Falak woke to Iredi's empty bed. The window was open, the night air cold against her skin as panic exploded through her chest like wildfire. "Iredi!" Her scream tore through the apartment, raw and primal, the sound of a mother's entire world collapsing in real time. Security burst in within seconds. Taemin arrived minutes later, his face pale in a way Falak had never seen, his usual control completely abandoned. "Where's the security footage?" he barked at his head of detail, voice sharp enough to cut glass. The footage showed 2 men in dark clothing entering through a service corridor that should have been locked. One of them carried a small figure wrapped in a blanket toward a black car waiting in the alley behind the building. Taemin's expression went somewhere beyond anger, somewhere cold and absolute. "Track that plate," he said. "Now. If your heart is racing right now, stay with me, because what happens in the next 20 minutes determines everything." The black car was traced to an old shipping warehouse near the Lagos waterfront, registered under a shell company linked to Park Industries. Taemin didn't wait for police. He didn't wait for lawyers. He made one phone call, his voice low and controlled in a way that frightened Folak more than shouting ever could. "Assemble the team." She had never seen this side of him, the Mafia boss underneath the CEO, the man whose family legacy ran far deeper and far darker than international business mergers. "I need to come with you," Folek said, already grabbing her coat. "It's not safe." "She's my daughter." Something in his eyes told her arguing further would cost precious time. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens inside, you stay behind me." The warehouse was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of rust and salt water from the nearby docks. Folek's heart hammered against her ribs as Taemin's men moved silently ahead, securing the perimeter with practiced precision that revealed exactly how long this organization had operated, in shadows most people never saw. Taemin stopped her once at the entrance, gripping her shoulder. "Whatever you hear in the next few minutes, whatever I have to say in there, you have to trust that it's calculated. Not who I want to be, who I have to be for the next 10 minutes to bring her home safely." "I trust you," she whispered, and meant it more than she'd ever meant anything. They found Areti in a small back office, awake, frightened, but unharmed, sitting on a metal chair while one of Park's men stood guard nearby. Folak nearly collapsed with relief at the sight of her daughter's tear-streaked face. "Mommy!" "Shh, baby, I'm here. I'm here." "The man said we were going on a trip," Iredi whispered, clinging to her mother's neck. "I didn't want to go. I told him I wanted you." "You did so well, baby. You did so well." But relief was short-lived. Park Hyun-woo stepped out from a side door, applauding slowly, mockingly. "Impressive response time, Taemin. though I expected nothing less from the great Kang family legacy. You crossed a line that doesn't come back from forgiveness, Taemin said, his voice quiet in that same dangerous way it had been the night he confronted Park at the gala. She's my daughter. I'm simply taking what's mine. She is not a business asset, Folek snapped, clutching Eretti tighter. She is a child. My child. You don't get to traumatize a 3-year-old because your father is impatient about a will. Park's smile flickered, just slightly. Careful how you speak to me, Folek. You're not exactly in a position of power right now. Wrong, Taemin said, stepping forward slowly, deliberately, each footstep echoing off the warehouse's metal walls. She has never once been in a position of power, Park. That's the difference between you two. She's never needed power to do the right thing. You've never managed to do the right thing even with all the power in the world. Touching speech. Doesn't change the math, Taemin. I have lawyers. I have a verified blood test already filed with the court. I have everything I need. You have nothing, Taemin said, because biology doesn't make a father. Presence does. Sacrifice does. You abandoned them both years ago and only returned because your dying father's company needs a bloodline to inherit it. That's not fatherhood, Park. That's desperation wearing an expensive suit. Park's confidence flickered again, more visibly this time. Careful, Taemin. My family still holds significant shares in... Held, Taemin corrected coldly. As of 40 minutes ago, my legal team filed emergency injunctions against Park Industries, exposing illegal surveillance, attempted kidnapping, and several financial irregularities your father's board has been desperately trying to hide before his health forces a transition of power. By morning, every shareholder in Seoul will know exactly what kind of man you really are. You're bluffing. I don't bluff, Taemin said. I calculate. And right now, the calculation says you have two choices. Walk away from this warehouse quietly, sign away any custody claims permanently, and keep whatever fragments of dignity remain. Or continue this and watch your father's company collapse under scandal before he even has the chance to die with his name intact. One of Park's men shifted toward the door, clearly reconsidering his loyalty now that the math had visibly turned against his employer. Taemin's people noticed immediately, closing the distance just enough to make clear that no quiet exit existed for anyone in that room without his permission. The room held its breath. For a long, suffocating moment, nobody moved. Then Park, recognizing the calculation had already turned against him, laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and defeated. You always did love playing the hero, Taemin. Fine, take your precious family. I don't need a child's blood to inherit a company. I'll find another way. You'll sign the documents, Taemin said. Tonight, witnessed and notarized before you leave Lagos. Park's jaw tightened, pride warring with the reality of his collapsing position. But men like him, when truly cornered, always chose survival over principle. Fine, he muttered. Fine. It was over almost as quickly as it had begun, the kind of ending that felt both impossibly fast and like it had taken 6 years to arrive. Folak held Eretti the entire ride home, refusing to let go even after they were safely back inside the apartment, even after the documents were signed, even after Taemin confirmed 3 times that security had been doubled around the building. It wasn't until much later, after Eretti had finally fallen asleep between them on the couch, exhausted from fear and relief in equal measure, that Folake allowed herself to fully break down. I almost lost her, she whispered. I almost lost everything. You didn't, Taemin said softly, his hand finding hers across the small space between them. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not to her, not to you. Why do you keep saving us? He considered the question carefully, the way he considered everything important. Because somewhere between a hospital corridor I barely remember and a ballroom where I lost control in front of 300 people, I think I started falling in love with the kind of strength that refuses to break, even when the world gives it every reason to. Folek's breath caught. Taemin, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to know. I know, she whispered, because I think I've been falling too. I was just too scared to admit it, given everything happening around us. She texted Bissy at almost 3 in the morning, unable to hold the news inside her chest a moment longer. She's safe. We're safe. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Bissy called instead of texting back, voice thick with sleep and worry. Folake, what is going on? Are you all right? Is it ready? She's fine, she's sleeping. Taemin got her back. A long pause, then quietly. I always told you that man looked at you like you were something he couldn't afford to lose. Guess I was right. You're impossible. I'm right, which is different from impossible. Go to sleep, babe. Tell me everything tomorrow over Suya. All of it. Don't leave anything out. Folake laughed for the first time in days, a small, exhausted, grateful sound, and for once allowed herself to simply rest. The custody hearing that Friday became a formality rather than a battle, the signed documents from that warehouse making any further legal dispute irrelevant. The judge dismissed Park's case within minutes, noting the irregularities discovered in his sudden claim with visible disapproval. By the following week, news had spread quietly through Lagos's business circles. Park Industries was undergoing what insiders called leadership restructuring, a polite term for the scandal that had quietly forced both Park Hyun-woo and his ailing father out of active company control. Taemin, true to his nature, never publicly confirmed his involvement. He simply returned to his usual composed presence in boardrooms, the same cold precision everyone expected. Except now, occasionally, something softer flickered behind his eyes when certain people entered the room. Folake didn't return to her old position. Taemin made sure of that, though he was careful, deliberate even, about how he restructured things, never wanting her advancement to feel like a transaction tied to their personal relationship rather than genuine respect for her capability. You're the most composed person I've ever watched handle chaos, he told her honestly, during her transition into a senior guest relations director role. That's not me doing you a favor. That's me recognizing exactly what you're worth. Months passed differently after that. Quieter, safer. The kind of ordinary that Folak had once believed was permanently out of her reach. Ireti, blissfully unaware of how close danger had come to taking her away, continued narrating elaborate stories about dinosaurs preferring spaghetti, now with the added detail that Uncle Taemin apparently agreed with her completely on this important culinary matter. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, not exactly. Folek still carried the weight of everything that happened in Seoul years ago. The abandonment, the fear, the years of believing she had to be strong entirely alone. Taemin still carried the complicated legacy of a family business built on both legitimate success and shadows he wasn't always proud of. There were hard conversations still ahead of them, nights when old fear crept back into Folek's chest without warning, when she'd wake gasping from dreams of black cars and empty beds, and Taemin would simply hold her until her breathing slowed, never rushing her past the fear, never pretending it should already be gone. There were moments when Taemin's world, the boardrooms, the quiet violence underneath his family's legacy, the expectations of men who had built empires on ruthlessness, pulled at him in ways Folak couldn't fully understand. He started seeing a therapist quietly, the first Kang in 3 generations to admit that strength and silence were not always the same thing. He told Folak about it almost shyly, like he expected her to think less of him for needing help. She kissed him instead and told him it was the bravest thing she'd ever watched him do. But healing, real healing, was never about erasing the past. It was about choosing, deliberately and consistently, to build something steadier than the broken pieces that came before. One evening, almost a year after that gala night, Taemin found Folake on the balcony of the apartment they now shared, watching Lagos's skyline glow gold and orange against the setting sun. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, joining her at the railing. "I was just thinking about how different my life looks now," she admitted. "A year ago, I was terrified of losing my job over a man who refused to let go of my wrist. Now look at everything." "Any regrets?" "None," she said, leaning into him naturally, the way trust grows when it's finally given permission to exist without fear. "Just gratitude that the worst night of my life somehow became the beginning of the best chapter." Taemin was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing slow circles against the back of her hand, the way he did when something important was sitting just behind his teeth, waiting for the courage to come out. "I used to believe love was a liability," he said finally, "something my father warned me against. something every Kang before me treated as a weakness rivals could exploit. I spent 34 years building walls so thick I forgot what it felt like to need anyone. And now? Now I think the only thing I've ever actually been afraid of losing is you and that little girl currently negotiating with BC over how much pepper belongs in jollof rice. He reached into his jacket pocket, and Falake's heart stuttered at the small velvet box that appeared in his palm. I'm not asking because tradition expects it, or because appearances matter, or because a board somewhere needs an heir secured. I'm asking because every single version of my future I can imagine only makes sense if you and Areti are standing in it. Folake's eyes filled before she could stop them. 6 years of carrying every burden alone finally allowed to set down its weight. Taemin, you don't have to answer tonight, he said quickly, the careful CEO momentarily eclipsed by something far more nervous and human. I just needed you to know what I... Yes, she said, laughing through the tears now, cutting him off before he could finish talking himself into more careful hesitation. Yes, Taemin, 1,000 times, yes. Taemin wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer, his usual careful composure replaced by something easier, lighter, the kind of peace that only comes from finally putting down a burden you've carried for far too long. Mommy! Uncle Taemin! Ireti's voice rang out from inside the apartment, followed quickly by small feet running toward the balcony. Dinner's ready. BC said you have to come now or she's eating your share. Folake wiped her eyes quickly, laughing. Coming, baby. Ireti skidded to a stop at the balcony door, taking in her mother's tear-streaked, joyful face with the unguarded curiosity only a 3-year-old possesses. Why are you crying? Is it happy crying or sad crying? Happy crying, Folake assured her, scooping her daughter up despite her protests of being too big for carrying. Good, Ireti decided, because Uncle Taemin promised we could get a puppy if I'm brave, and I was very brave at the warehouse, so he owes me. Taemin raised an eyebrow at Folek, clearly caught between amusement and the realization he'd made a promise he now had to honor. I did say that. You did, Folek confirmed, grinning. Welcome to fatherhood. Negotiations start early. They laughed together, the easy, unguarded laughter of people who had survived enough chaos to finally appreciate the ordinary, beautiful moments. As they turned to head inside, Taemin paused for just a moment, looking at Folak the way he had that very first night, searching her face for confirmation that she was truly all right. This time, when she smiled back at him, there was no hesitation in her answer. She was all right. They were all right. Finally, completely, undeniably all right. And somewhere across Lagos, in a quiet penthouse no longer haunted by fear of black cars or whispered threats, a small family that had been built from heartbreak, courage, and one unforgettable night in a crowded ballroom continued writing a story far stronger than anything that had once tried to break it apart. Because sometimes the love that saves you isn't the love you expected. Sometimes it's the love that simply refuses to let go, even when everyone else around you already had.